I grabbed a flashlight, my hands trembling, and opened the door a crack. The rain was cold against my face, soaking the collar of my shirt instantly. He muttered something I couldn't catch, something garbled by the storm and the wind, then shoved the box at me and stepped back into the shadows, fading like he belonged to them. The box landed on the threshold with a dull thump, and I heard the soft splash of his footsteps retreating into the wet darkness. I hesitated, staring at the box, feeling the weight of it in my hands even before I opened it. The smell hit me first, faint, earthy, almost like damp soil mixed with something rotting, something not quite natural. I knelt down slowly, trying to calm the sudden surge of panic, and opened the flaps. Inside was a tangle of old worn shoes. Children's shoes mostly, tiny, muddy, frayed at the edges, some soaked through. A pair of scuffed sneakers, a ballet flat with a missing strap, a cracked leather boot that looked like it hadn't been worn in decades. I recoiled, the hair on my arms standing on end. I didn't recognize any of them, couldn't place where they'd come from. And yet they felt intentional, like he'd picked them for me. Like they were meant to send a message I couldn't yet understand. I slammed the box shut and shoved it to the side of the porch, trying to shake the unease crawling over my skin. I spent the next hour sitting in the living room, lights on, ears straining for any sound. The rain had started to let up, leaving the hollow quiet that made every creak of the old house feel sinister. I couldn't stop thinking about the shoes, their small abandoned shapes, the strange care in the way they'd been arranged. And then it happened, the knock again. Faint, almost polite, like someone testing if I'd really gone mad. I bolted to the door, but when I looked, nothing. Just the wet yard, the dark trees, and the empty gravel road. Over the next few nights, it kept happening. The knock always came past midnight, soft at first, then deliberate. Sometimes the box would be on the doorstep when I opened the door. Other times, I'd find small, mundane things left there, a single boot, a child's mitten, a crumpled piece of paper with nothing written on it. I never saw him clearly, never caught more than a fleeting shadow moving through the trees. And yet the sense of being watched became unbearable. I started locking every door and window, triple-checking the chains, but even then, the feeling lingered. Like the holler itself had eyes. Like the isolation had attracted something that had been waiting for me. I tried to tell myself it was someone playing a cruel prank. Maybe a neighbor, maybe someone who had been watching me. But the shoes, the way they were left, each one worn, caked in mud, like traces of lives I didn't know, made it impossible to laugh it off. One night I got brave enough to open the box slowly, examining the shoes under the dim porch light. A note had been tucked in between them, written in a shaky hand. "They are coming." I froze, the paper trembling in my fingers. My heart pounded in my chest like a hammer. The wind rustled the leaves, and for a moment I could have sworn I heard faint, childish laughter, soft and fleeting, coming from the edge of the tree line. Sleep became impossible. I started keeping a flashlight under my pillow, double-checking the locks every hour. The knock never came when I had company, only when I was alone, deep in the holler, miles from the road and any help. I began noticing small signs, things I hadn't paid attention to before. Footprints in the muddy path leading from the road to my porch. Marks in the soil where someone had been dragging a box. The faint impression of tiny shoes pressed into the wet dirt, as if they'd walked there themselves. The sensation of being watched grew into something tangible, like a weight pressing on my chest when I stepped outside after dark. I remember one particular night vividly. The rain had stopped, leaving a thick mist that settled low over the holler. I was just about to drift off when I heard the knock, slow and deliberate. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the door, peering through the small window. A figure stood there, motionless, rain dripping from his coat despite the clear sky. The box was gone. I flung open the door, ready to confront him, but he was already gone, leaving only the imprint of his boots in the muddy threshold. I stepped outside, my flashlight beam cutting through the fog, and saw the trail leading back into the woods. It was fresh, the mud still soft, but there were also smaller prints alongside it, tiny, worn shoes like the ones in the boxes. I backed inside quickly, slamming the door, shaking uncontrollably, and that night I didn't sleep at all. Weeks turned into months, and the visits continued. Always past midnight, always accompanied by the soft rustle of something left on the porch. I never saw him clearly, never spoke to him, and never knew what he wanted. The boxes always contained shoes, always old, always worn, always children's shoes, and always just enough to remind me that someone, or something, had been paying attention, watching, choosing exactly what to leave and when to leave it. Friends and neighbors started noticing my jumpiness, my obsession with locking doors, and they'd shake their heads, saying I should just move back to town, get away from the holler. But I couldn't. The house was mine now, and the sense of being tethered to this place, by fear, by curiosity, or something else I couldn't explain. The last time I saw him, I thought I recognized his face in the shadows of my porch light, but when I stepped closer, he vanished. I opened the box he left that night to find nothing but a single worn baby shoe, mud-caked, as if freshly taken from somewhere he had walked. I still hear the knock sometimes, faint, almost polite, like someone checking in, like they're waiting for me to answer. I don't know who he is, what he wants, or why he keeps coming. All I know is the holler is quiet again, but not really. The kind of quiet that makes your own heartbeat sound like a stranger, like the wind and the trees are whispering about things you don't want to know. And in that quiet, I swear I can still hear the soft knock at the back door, past midnight, just outside the hedge, waiting for me. It was late, somewhere past 11, the kind of quiet where even the old pipes in my apartment seemed to hold their breath. I lived alone then, in a building that had seen better years, peeling paint, flickering lights, the faint smell of mildew that never quite went away. I was sitting on the couch with a half-finished beer, the television muted, trying to convince myself to turn in for the night. That's when I heard it, a knock. Not frantic or loud, but slow, deliberate, echoing through the narrow hallway outside my door. At first, I thought it was my neighbor across the hall. He was an older man, kept odd hours, and sometimes forgot which door was his. But when I looked through the peephole, the hall was empty. Just the dim yellow light from the single flickering bulb and the sound of the radiator ticking like a metronome. I waited, holding my breath, and just when I was about to turn away, the knock came again. 3 slow raps, spaced out, patient. I felt that strange instinctive dread rise up from somewhere deep, the one that tells you something's wrong before your brain catches up. I leaned into the peephole again. This time there was someone there. A man standing still, his shoulders hunched like the weight of his coat was too much for him. His face was angled down, hidden in the shadow cast by the hallway light. In his right hand, he held a small paper bag, folded neatly at the top. He didn't move, didn't shift his weight, didn't knock again. Just stood there waiting. I whispered to myself, probably some delivery mix-up, but I knew better. Nobody delivers anything that late out here. I considered calling the landlord, but he lived 2 floors up and was half deaf. The police seemed excessive. The thought that maybe this man needed help crossed my mind, and that's what finally made me move. Foolish maybe, but curiosity can drown out fear if you let it. I unlatched the chain and cracked the door an inch. The smell of the hallway came in. Stale air, wet concrete, and something else. The man lifted his head slightly, and though I couldn't see his eyes, I felt him looking straight through me. He said something, but it was so soft I couldn't make out the words. I started to close the door, whispering, "Wrong apartment." But before I could, he stepped forward and pushed lightly, not enough to force it, just enough to make the air shift between us. Then he held out the bag. He didn't try to come inside, just extended his arm, waiting. Against all reason, I took it. The bag was damp at the bottom, the paper soft from moisture. When I looked back up, he was already turning away. I heard his shoes scuff lightly against the worn carpet as he moved down the hall. I opened the door wider, calling out, "Hey!" But he was gone. I mean gone, like he hadn't been there at all. I shut the door and locked every bolt, the sound echoing too loud in the silence that followed. The paper bag sat on the floor like it didn't belong in my world. I thought about throwing it out, but something about it demanded attention. I carried it to the kitchen table and unfolded the top. Inside were dozens of small sheets of paper, some yellowed, some newer, all filled with handwriting. My handwriting, I froze. At first I thought someone had gone through my trash, maybe found old notes or lists. But these weren't things I'd ever written down. Each page described moments of my life, small, specific things I'd never told anyone. One note mentioned a dream I'd had the week before where I was trapped in an old house with no doors. Another described how I'd left a light on in the bathroom because I didn't like how dark the hallway got at night. Another one said in shaky script, He knows when you listen for him. My chest went cold. I flipped through them, faster now, scanning the lines. They were all about me, things I'd done alone, thoughts I'd had when I was sure no one could hear. The last note, folded tighter than the rest, just said, "Check the peephole." I stood there for what felt like a full minute, staring at the door. I told myself it was some cruel joke, maybe someone who'd been watching, trying to mess with me. My building was old, thin walls, plenty of weird tenants over the years. But still, I couldn't shake the pulse of dread that ran through me. I turned slowly toward the door and stepped close enough to hear the hum of the hallway light through the wood. My fingers trembled as I leaned into the peephole. At first, nothing. Just the empty hallway again. Then a shadow moved across the far end. Not fast, not sudden, just a slow shape gliding into view. The man was standing there again at the far end of the hall, facing away from me. His shoulders were rising and falling like he was breathing hard. I almost called out, but before I could, his head turned slightly. Not all the way, just enough for me to see the outline of his cheek, the pale gleam of an eye catching the light. Then he took a single step toward my door. I stumbled back. My mind screamed to grab the phone, call someone, do anything. But when I looked again through the peephole, he was gone. The hall was empty. Not a sound, not a trace. Only the faint, rhythmic creak of the old pipes. I checked the locks again, pushed a chair under the handle, and sat on the couch with the lights on until the sun started to rise. The next morning, I told myself it had to be a dream, a trick of exhaustion, or maybe even a prank from one of the neighbors. I gathered the papers and threw them in the trash chute. For the rest of the day, I tried to shake it off. But that night, when I got home from work, there was another bag sitting outside my door. Same kind, same fold at the top. I didn't open it. I took it straight down to the dumpster, threw it in, and went back upstairs, forcing myself not to look down the hallway. But when I woke up the next morning, it was there again, sitting neatly in front of my door. This time I didn't have to open it to know what was inside. I could feel the weight of it, like it carried more than paper. I left it there and went to work. When I came back that night, it was gone. Over the next few weeks, strange things started happening. My lights flickered randomly, always around the same time, the hour between 11 and midnight. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly in the hallway, sometimes close, sometimes distant. Always slow, deliberate, like someone pacing. I stopped sleeping well, started keeping the television on just for noise. One night, I heard a faint scratching at the door, like someone's fingernails dragging lightly down the wood. I stood frozen in the dark, listening. It went on for nearly a minute, then stopped. When I finally looked through the peephole, there was nothing but the empty hallway. I moved out 2 months later. I didn't tell the landlord why. I just packed up what I could carry and left in the middle of the day. The new apartment was brighter, cleaner, busier. But sometimes, late at night when the city quiets down, I still hear that soft scuff of shoes just outside my door. I tell myself it's the neighbor across the hall, or the pipes, or the wind coming through the vents. But then, every so often, I find something waiting for me. A small folded paper bag left outside my door. No markings, no note. I never open them anymore. I just throw them away and try not to think about the sound of someone breathing quietly on the other side of the peephole, waiting for me to listen.